In The Shadow Effect, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, and Debbie Ford explore the hidden aspects of our psyche, our shadow, those parts of ourselves that we often deny or repress. These neglected aspects of our personality, emotions, and desires have a powerful influence on our lives, shaping our behaviors, relationships, and inner conflicts. The shadow represents everything we deem unworthy, flawed, or unacceptable, but by facing it and integrating it into our conscious self, we can experience profound healing, empowerment, and personal growth. The authors teach us that embracing the shadow is not about rejecting or eliminating it, but about accepting and understanding it in order to reclaim our full potential. At MindFuel Audio, we believe in the transformative power of knowledge and self-awareness. Just as the shadow effect encourages us to confront the parts of ourselves that we tend to hide, our channel offers you the tools to explore the depths of your own potential. Through motivational and intellectual audiobooks, we aim to help you unlock the secrets of personal development, emotional intelligence, and empowerment. Whether you're looking to transform your mindset, build healthier relationships, or confront the hidden parts of yourself, we're here to fuel your growth and inspire you to live an authentic, purposeful life. By embracing the wisdom found in books like The Shadow Effect, we can begin the journey of self-discovery, healing, and empowerment, creating ripples of positive change that affect not only our own lives but the world around us. Part 1: Understanding the Shadow. In The Shadow Effect, Part 1 serves as an essential introduction to the concept of the shadow as it pertains to our emotional, psychological, and spiritual lives. The shadow, a term introduced by Carl Jung, refers to the unconscious parts of ourselves that we suppress, deny, or hide because they don't align with the image we want to project to the world or the persona we've built for ourselves. The shadow consists of qualities, desires, fears, and experiences that we find difficult to accept or confront, often because society, our families, or our own egos deem them unacceptable. These repressed aspects of ourselves can include our darkest impulses, such as anger, jealousy, shame, and guilt, but they can also encompass unexpressed talents, desires, and parts of our personality that have been ignored or neglected. The authors, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, and Debbie Ford, discuss how the shadow begins to form early in life. Children naturally absorb the beliefs, expectations, and values of their families and societies, but some of these values can lead to the rejection of certain parts of themselves. For example, a child might be told that being angry is wrong or that showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness. These messages cause the child to repress their natural emotional responses, pushing those emotions into the unconscious mind. As time goes on, these suppressed emotions, desires, and traits are buried deep in the subconscious, but they continue to influence behavior, thoughts, and interactions with others. The book highlights the idea that the shadow isn't inherently bad, it's simply the parts of us that we have rejected or failed to integrate. In fact, the shadow often contains untapped potential and power. However, when we allow the shadow to remain hidden and unresolved, it leads to unconscious patterns that limit our growth and lead to negative emotions, self-sabotage, and unhealthy behaviors. For instance, someone who represses their anger might experience it as passive-aggressive behavior or outbursts of frustration at inappropriate times, while someone who suppresses their sexuality might find themselves engaging in self-destructive behaviors related to intimacy. The authors emphasize the importance of understanding that everyone has a shadow. No one is exempt from this psychological phenomenon, no matter how perfect or successful they may seem on the outside. The shadow doesn't discriminate based on age, gender, or social status, it is a universal human experience. It manifests in subtle ways: jealousy of others' success, the tendency to judge or criticize, the projection of our own issues onto others, and in some cases, destructive patterns such as addiction, manipulation, or compulsive behavior. This section also addresses the idea that the shadow can manifest in our relationships. When we project our own unresolved emotions onto others, we either see in them the traits we dislike in ourselves or the ones we wish we had. This projection can lead to misunderstandings, conflicts, and unhealthy dynamics in relationships. By understanding the shadow, the authors argue, we gain access to a deeper level of self-awareness. We begin to realize that the parts of ourselves that we've rejected are not inherently harmful but can become sources of strength and creativity once we integrate them. This section encourages readers to start becoming aware of their own shadow by reflecting on their triggers, emotional reactions, and patterns of behavior. The book introduces the concept of shadow work, a process that involves acknowledging and examining the parts of ourselves that we have repressed, no matter how uncomfortable or painful it may be. This work requires courage and honesty, as it often brings up uncomfortable truths about ourselves that we would rather not face. The authors share exercises, questions, and reflections that can help guide readers toward recognizing their own shadow. These tools are designed to help individuals begin to look at their unconscious beliefs and feelings, understand the ways in which these hidden aspects influence their behavior, and start the process of integrating them. The integration process involves accepting the shadow and allowing it to become part of our whole self, rather than continuing to reject it. Additionally, the authors discuss how society contributes to the creation of the shadow. Social norms, cultural expectations, and familial conditioning often dictate what is considered acceptable or desirable behavior, and in doing so, they suppress anything that doesn't fit into those narrow definitions. For example, many societies discourage vulnerability, emotion, or any display of imperfection, leading people to hide these aspects of themselves. This societal pressure, while it may help individuals conform to cultural norms, also creates an environment where personal growth becomes stunted because people are afraid to confront their true selves. This section also touches on the impact of spiritual growth in relation to the shadow. Many spiritual traditions encourage detachment from the ego, but this can sometimes lead to spiritual bypassing, where individuals suppress their emotions or shadow in the name of spiritual enlightenment. True spiritual growth, the authors argue, requires not detachment from the shadow but a conscious engagement with it. In other words, personal growth comes not from rejecting our flaws but from understanding and embracing them, thereby transcending the ego's limitations. Part 1 of the shadow effect sets the stage for the reader to explore their own unconscious, bringing awareness to those parts of themselves that have been long buried. By the end of this section, readers are encouraged to embark on a journey of self-discovery, with the understanding that the shadow is not something to fear or reject, but something to confront and integrate. The shadow is ultimately a key to unlocking a more authentic, empowered, and whole self. Part 2, The Nature and Power of the Shadow. In The Shadow Effect, Part 2 dives deeply into the immense power the shadow exerts over our lives and minds when it remains unacknowledged and hidden. The authors, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, and Debbie Ford, reveal that the shadow's influence is pervasive and insidious, often manifesting in unconscious ways that sabotage our potential for happiness, growth, and success. This section of the book explores the nature of the shadow in greater detail, explaining how it controls and shapes our lives by acting as a hidden force in our psyche. The shadow doesn't operate openly or deliberately. Instead, it influences us through subtle, often unnoticed ways that affect our decisions, emotions, and behavior, often leading us to make choices that do not align with our true selves or desires. The authors stress that the shadow is not inherently evil, rather, it contains aspects of our personality, desires, and experiences that have been repressed or deemed unacceptable by the conscious mind. These suppressed aspects include not only negative traits, such as anger, fear, jealousy, and shame, but also parts of us that are misunderstood, ignored, or suppressed, such as unexpressed talents, dreams, and emotions. By repressing these qualities, we unintentionally give them power over us. The more we suppress the shadow, the more it controls our actions, often leading us to act in self-destructive or unproductive ways. This section emphasizes the importance of recognizing that the shadow is not separate from us, it is a part of who we are. When we deny or repress the shadow, we essentially disconnect from our true selves, creating a division between our conscious identity and our unconscious mind. The authors argue that this disconnection leads to a fragmented sense of self, which can cause emotional and psychological dissonance. For example, an individual who represses their anger might find themselves struggling with feelings of frustration, irritability, or passive-aggressive behavior, without understanding the root cause of these emotions. The section explains that the shadow has a magnetic power. It draws us into situations that bring out the very traits we have denied or failed to integrate. The authors use the concept of projection to explain how the shadow operates. When we project our own unacknowledged traits or emotions onto others, we tend to see these traits in other people, even if they don't actually possess them. For example, someone who is afraid of being judged may project that fear onto others, seeing them as judgmental, even if they aren't. This projection distorts our perception of reality and leads to unhealthy relationships and misunderstandings. The shadow also has the power to influence our behavior in ways that are often self-sabotaging. For instance, someone who is afraid of success might engage in behaviors that undermine their efforts or create obstacles in their path. These behaviors might include procrastination, perfectionism, or self-doubt, which stem from the unconscious fear of success or the belief that they are unworthy of achieving their goals. The shadow works to protect us from what it perceives as threats, whether those threats are emotional, psychological, or social, by keeping us in patterns of behavior that are familiar, even if those patterns are harmful. In this part, the authors introduce the idea of shadow energy, the emotional and psychological force that the shadow exerts when it is denied and suppressed. Shadow energy manifests as negative emotions, compulsive behaviors, and irrational fears that can take over our thoughts and actions. This energy is powerful and often pushes us to act in ways that are not aligned with our authentic desires or values. The book suggests that acknowledging and facing the shadow allows us to release this energy, transforming it into a constructive force for growth and healing. The authors also explain that the shadow can show up in a variety of forms, as addictive behaviors, self-destructive patterns, unresolved emotional trauma, or negative thought patterns. When we fail to confront the shadow, we inadvertently allow these forms to shape our lives in ways that are out of our control. The more we resist or deny the shadow, the more it seeks to assert itself through unconscious behavior. This results in a vicious cycle of repression and resistance, in which the shadow becomes more powerful the more we try to ignore it. However, the authors also provide a hopeful message. Acknowledging and integrating the shadow can lead to profound healing and transformation. They discuss the importance of developing self-awareness and mindfulness as tools to begin the process of shadow integration. By becoming more conscious of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, we can start to recognize when the shadow is influencing us and take steps to understand its root causes. The process of integrating the shadow involves embracing these hidden aspects of ourselves rather than rejecting them. This acceptance allows us to release the negative energy the shadow carries and use its power to fuel positive change in our lives. The authors also emphasize that integrating the shadow does not mean we need to change who we are or become perfect. Instead, it's about accepting all parts of ourselves, our flaws, imperfections, and vulnerabilities, and recognizing that they are integral to our humanity. Embracing the shadow allows us to become more whole, authentic, and empowered individuals. The authors argue that by doing so, we free ourselves from the grip of unconscious forces and take control of our own destiny. The section concludes by exploring the spiritual dimensions of shadow work. Spirituality, the authors argue, is not about detaching from the world or denying our human experiences, but about embracing all aspects of our being, both light and dark. True spiritual growth comes from accepting our shadow, not from rejecting it. The book encourages readers to see the shadow as an opportunity for growth rather than something to be feared or avoided. When we face the shadow, we open the door to deeper self-understanding, healing, and transformation. Part 3: How the Shadow Affects Our Relationships. In The Shadow Effect, Part 3 explores the profound impact that the shadow, those unconscious and repressed aspects of ourselves, has on our relationships with others. The authors, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, and Debbie Ford, argue that much of the conflict, misunderstanding, and disconnection that occur in relationships stem from the projection of our shadow onto others. The shadow doesn't only affect our relationship with ourselves but significantly influences how we perceive and interact with the people around us. When we fail to confront our shadow, we inadvertently project it onto others, which leads to distorted perceptions and unhealthy relational patterns. This section of the book reveals the complex ways in which the shadow operates within interpersonal dynamics and offers a deeper understanding of how to bring more conscious awareness to these hidden influences. The authors begin by explaining that our relationships are often the mirror through which we see our own shadow. The dynamics we experience with others are not merely a reflection of their behavior but are often projections of our own unacknowledged traits. For example, if we have repressed anger, we might see others as angry or hostile when they express frustration, even if their behavior is not directed at us. Alternatively, if we have unacknowledged feelings of guilt or shame, we may attract relationships in which we feel criticized or blamed, even if the other person is not doing so consciously. These projections can create confusion, defensiveness, and unnecessary conflict, making it difficult to connect with others authentically. The authors emphasize that projection is a defense mechanism that serves to protect the ego from the discomfort of facing uncomfortable truths about ourselves. Rather than acknowledging and integrating the shadow, we project it onto others, which allows us to avoid confronting the parts of ourselves that we find undesirable or threatening. However, this projection distorts our perception of reality, often leading to conflict, misunderstanding, and emotional distance. For example, we may accuse others of being judgmental when, in reality, we are projecting our own judgmental tendencies onto them. Similarly, we might experience envy toward someone's success, not realizing that this envy stems from our own unfulfilled desires or insecurities. The book also discusses how repressed aspects of the shadow can lead to unhealthy attachment styles and codependent relationships. People who have unresolved emotional wounds or fears of abandonment may unconsciously choose partners who reinforce those fears, creating a cycle of emotional dependency and insecurity. In contrast, those who repress vulnerability may attract partners who are emotionally distant or avoidant. These relational patterns can lead to frustration and dissatisfaction, as both partners are unconsciously drawn to dynamics that reinforce their unresolved emotional issues. The authors explain that our relationships can either serve as a vehicle for healing or as a mirror that reflects our unresolved emotional baggage. By recognizing the shadow in our relationships, we begin to understand the underlying patterns that drive our behavior and our interactions with others. The book encourages readers to examine the dynamics in their relationships to uncover where their own unconscious projections are at play. This self-awareness is crucial in breaking free from unhealthy relational patterns and creating more authentic and fulfilling connections. Additionally, the authors explore the role of the shadow in romantic relationships. They explain that romantic partnerships often bring up the most intense aspects of the shadow, as they create a space for emotional vulnerability and intimacy. In these relationships, individuals are often forced to confront the parts of themselves they have hidden away, whether it's unhealed wounds from childhood, unacknowledged desires, or unresolved fears. The authors argue that romantic relationships are an opportunity for growth, as they provide a context in which individuals can work through their shadows together. However, this requires both partners to be willing to engage in self-reflection, emotional honesty, and mutual healing. The section also delves into the impact of the shadow on family dynamics. Families are often the first place where the shadow is formed, as childhood experiences and familial conditioning shape our beliefs about who we are and what is acceptable. In many cases, family members act as mirrors for one another's shadows, triggering emotional reactions that stem from unresolved childhood wounds. For example, a parent might criticize a child for showing vulnerability, unconsciously projecting their own fear of weakness onto the child. Similarly, siblings might compete with one another because of unresolved feelings of inadequacy or rivalry. These family dynamics can perpetuate unhealthy patterns that carry on into adulthood unless they are addressed consciously. The authors also explore how societal and cultural conditioning contributes to the formation of the shadow in relationships. In many cultures, certain traits, such as vulnerability, assertiveness, or emotional expression, are considered undesirable or weak. This societal pressure forces individuals to suppress these qualities, creating a shadow that can manifest in their relationships. For example, someone who has been taught that expressing emotion is a sign of weakness may suppress their feelings, leading to emotional distance and difficulty in forming close, intimate relationships. The book encourages readers to question these societal norms and conditioning, as doing so can help them liberate themselves from limiting beliefs and behaviors that prevent them from fully engaging in authentic relationships. The authors also stress the importance of self-awareness and shadow work in transforming relational dynamics. Shadow work involves becoming aware of the parts of ourselves that we have repressed or denied and integrating them into our conscious awareness. This work can be challenging, as it requires us to confront uncomfortable emotions, past trauma, and negative beliefs about ourselves. However, by doing so, we can begin to heal the wounds that have influenced our relationships and create healthier, more fulfilling connections with others. Shadow work also involves taking responsibility for our projections and emotional reactions, rather than blaming others for our feelings. By doing so, we reclaim our power and shift the dynamics in our relationships from reactive to conscious. The section concludes by emphasizing that relationships are a powerful tool for personal growth and healing. The authors encourage readers to embrace the opportunity that relationships provide for self-reflection, emotional healing, and spiritual growth. By acknowledging the shadow in our relationships and taking responsibility for our projections and emotional responses, we can create deeper, more authentic connections that allow for mutual healing and transformation. The book argues that when we face the shadow, not only do we experience personal growth, but we also contribute to the healing of our relationships and the collective consciousness. Part 4, The Path to Integration. In The Shadow Effect, Part 4, The Path to Integration, focuses on how to consciously confront, understand, and ultimately integrate the shadow into one's life. The authors, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, and Debbie Ford, explain that shadow integration is a transformative process of self-acceptance, healing, and personal growth. Unlike repressing or rejecting the shadow, integration involves acknowledging and embracing the parts of ourselves that we have hidden or denied, including both the dark traits such as anger, jealousy, or fear, and the light traits such as unexpressed talents, desires, or vulnerabilities. This process is not about trying to eliminate or fix these aspects, but about accepting them and allowing them to become part of our wholeness. Integration allows us to reclaim our power, heal emotional wounds, and move toward living a more authentic and balanced life. The authors begin by emphasizing the importance of self-awareness in the integration process. Shadow work, they argue, requires that we actively bring unconscious patterns, beliefs, and emotions into the light of consciousness. We cannot integrate what we are unaware of, so the first step in the path to integration is self-reflection and mindfulness. This self-awareness involves recognizing the triggers, projections, and recurring patterns that reveal where the shadow is operating in our lives. For example, if we frequently react with defensiveness or anger in certain situations, this is a signal that there is an unresolved issue in our shadow. By becoming aware of these emotional reactions and behaviors, we can start to understand the underlying beliefs or suppressed emotions that are driving them. The process of shadow integration requires the courage to face discomfort and vulnerability. The authors stress that many of the shadow's aspects are difficult to confront, as they are linked to past trauma, shame, guilt, or rejection. The shadow holds the painful experiences we've avoided or denied, and facing these aspects can bring up feelings of fear, guilt, or shame. However, the authors emphasize that these emotions are a natural part of the healing process and should not be avoided. Integration is not about eliminating these feelings but about embracing them, understanding their source, and choosing to act from a place of greater awareness and acceptance. The authors also introduce the concept of reclaiming the shadow. When we repress parts of ourselves, we are essentially giving away our energy and power to those hidden aspects. Reclaiming the shadow means taking back that energy and using it constructively. For example, if we have repressed our anger for fear of being judged or rejected, we can begin to reclaim that anger by recognizing its value. Anger, when expressed healthily, can be a powerful motivator for change and can help us set boundaries or stand up for ourselves. By reclaiming the repressed parts of ourselves, we no longer allow them to control us unconsciously. Instead, we use them to create positive transformation in our lives. A key element of the integration process is developing self-compassion. The authors emphasize that shadow integration is not about self-criticism or judgment, but about self-love and acceptance. Many people resist confronting their shadow because they are afraid of what they will find: flaws, weaknesses, or unacknowledged desires. However, self-compassion allows us to approach the shadow with kindness and understanding, rather than fear or shame. By practicing self-compassion, we create a safe space for healing and growth, enabling us to embrace all parts of ourselves without judgment. The authors also suggest using various techniques to facilitate shadow integration, such as journaling, meditation, visualization, and therapy. These tools allow us to process our emotions, identify unconscious patterns, and connect with the deeper aspects of ourselves. For instance, journaling can help bring repressed thoughts and feelings to the surface, while meditation can promote mindfulness and self-awareness. Visualization exercises can help us imagine what it would feel like to integrate and accept our shadow, while therapy or counseling can provide support in working through the emotional complexities associated with the shadow. A significant part of the integration process involves forgiveness, both of ourselves and others. Many people carry the burden of past wounds, whether from childhood, relationships, or societal conditioning. These wounds often become part of the shadow, and healing them requires forgiveness. The authors explain that forgiveness is not about condoning harmful behavior, but about releasing the emotional hold that the past has over us. By forgiving ourselves for the mistakes or perceived shortcomings we have carried, and by forgiving others who have hurt us, we free ourselves from the emotional weight of the shadow and create space for healing. The path to integration is not a linear or quick process, it is a lifelong journey. The authors acknowledge that working with the shadow can be challenging and sometimes uncomfortable, but it is also a deeply rewarding process. As we integrate the shadow, we gradually move toward a more authentic and empowered version of ourselves. The authors suggest that this journey is a continual process of growth and self-discovery, and that each step forward brings us closer to becoming whole. The goal is not to fix ourselves but to embrace and embody the fullness of who we are, with all of our contradictions, vulnerabilities, and strengths. One of the key benefits of shadow integration is that it helps us cultivate deeper, more authentic relationships. As we become more aware of our own projections and unconscious patterns, we can interact with others in a more conscious and compassionate way. Integration allows us to move beyond the limitations of our ego and connect with others from a place of mutual understanding, respect, and emotional honesty. The authors emphasize that when we are no longer ruled by our shadow, we are able to build relationships based on true intimacy and vulnerability, rather than fear or defensiveness. The final section of Part 4 discusses how shadow integration leads to spiritual growth. The authors explain that spiritual growth is not about transcending or rejecting our human experiences, but about embracing them fully. Shadow integration is a crucial part of this process because it enables us to heal the wounds that block our connection to the divine and to our true selves. By integrating the shadow, we open ourselves to a deeper sense of peace, wisdom, and compassion. The authors suggest that true spiritual awakening occurs when we can accept and love all parts of ourselves, including the parts that we may have once considered dark or unworthy. The authors conclude by reminding readers that shadow integration is a path to freedom. When we stop denying or hiding from our shadow, we free ourselves from the unconscious patterns that limit our potential. Integration allows us to embrace our full humanity, and in doing so, we experience a greater sense of empowerment, authenticity, and wholeness. By facing the shadow with courage, self-compassion, and love, we create the space for transformation and healing, both within ourselves and in the world around us. Part 5, Transformation and Empowerment. In the Shadow Effect, Part 5, Transformation and Empowerment, focuses on the profound personal transformation and empowerment that occurs when we confront and integrate our shadow. The authors, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, and Debbie Ford, argue that integrating the shadow is not only essential for personal healing but also for unlocking our fullest potential as human beings. By acknowledging the unconscious aspects of ourselves that we have hidden or rejected, we can experience a powerful shift in our awareness, behavior, and relationships. This part of the book outlines the process through which shadow integration leads to a life of greater authenticity, creativity, emotional freedom, and spiritual empowerment. The authors begin by emphasizing that shadow integration is the key to unlocking personal transformation. When we deny or repress parts of ourselves, we are essentially living in a state of disconnection, disconnected from our true essence, from others, and from the life we are meant to live. The shadow represents the aspects of ourselves that we have rejected or hidden, and it holds the key to both our deepest wounds and our greatest potential. By facing the shadow, we reclaim the energy and power that we have unconsciously given away, allowing us to reconnect with our true selves and embrace our full capacity for creativity, love, and joy. Transformation, according to the authors, involves a fundamental shift in consciousness. As we become more aware of the shadow's influence on our lives, we begin to see the ways in which it shapes our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. This awareness is the first step toward change. The authors explain that when we are unconscious of the shadow, we are often driven by old patterns, unresolved emotions, and limiting beliefs that prevent us from living authentically. Once we begin to confront these aspects, we can replace them with new, more empowering ways of thinking and behaving. Transformation happens when we stop being controlled by our unconscious fears, desires, and repressed emotions, and instead take conscious responsibility for our lives. A central theme in this part of the book is the idea that transformation is a process of reclaiming our personal power. When we integrate the shadow, we stop giving away our energy to unconscious fears and suppressed emotions. We learn to trust ourselves and take ownership of our choices. The authors explain that many people give away their power by relying on external validation, approval, or control. They may seek approval from others or avoid confrontation to maintain harmony. However, when we integrate the shadow, we learn to trust our inner wisdom and make decisions from a place of authenticity and inner strength. The authors also discuss how integrating the shadow enables us to cultivate emotional freedom. Our repressed emotions often hold us captive, leading to feelings of shame, guilt, resentment, or fear. When we are unaware of the shadow, we may act out these emotions unconsciously, either through projection, defensiveness, or passive-aggressive behavior. By acknowledging and embracing these emotions, we free ourselves from their grip. For example, by embracing feelings of anger and learning to express them healthily, we can release the pent-up energy and use it for personal growth or to create positive change in our lives. The process of emotional freedom involves accepting all of our feelings without judgment, allowing them to flow through us without letting them control our behavior. In this section, the authors also highlight how transformation leads to greater creativity and self-expression. When we embrace the shadow, we no longer suppress the parts of ourselves that are capable of creating, innovating, and expressing our unique gifts. Often, people suppress their creativity or talents because they fear judgment or rejection, or because they have been conditioned to believe that they are not good enough. However, once we integrate the shadow, we liberate the creative energy that resides within us. The authors encourage readers to use their creativity as a tool for healing and empowerment. Whether through art, writing, music, or other forms of expression, creativity becomes a way to channel the energy of the shadow in a constructive and empowering manner. Empowerment, according to the authors, also comes from developing a sense of inner peace and self-acceptance. Shadow integration allows us to make peace with the parts of ourselves that we have previously rejected or denied. This acceptance of all aspects of ourselves, both light and dark, leads to a sense of wholeness. The authors stress that empowerment is not about perfection but about embracing our humanity, including our flaws, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities. Empowerment arises when we stop judging ourselves and others and begin to live in alignment with our true nature. This shift from self-judgment to self-compassion allows us to experience greater peace and satisfaction in our lives. The authors emphasize that transformation and empowerment are not just personal achievements but have a ripple effect on the world around us. As we integrate our shadow and become more authentic, we contribute to the collective healing of humanity. The energy we carry, whether positive or negative, affects the people we interact with. When we embrace our full selves, we model authenticity and self-empowerment for others, encouraging them to do the same. The authors encourage readers to see their journey of shadow integration not just as a personal process, but as part of the larger movement toward collective consciousness and healing. The final section of Part 5 discusses the role of spirituality in transformation and empowerment. The authors explain that true spiritual awakening involves embracing the shadow and integrating it into our lives. Spirituality is not about transcending our human experiences or denying our imperfections, but about accepting and embracing our full selves. When we are able to accept our shadow, we become more aligned with our higher self and the divine. The authors suggest that this process of spiritual integration allows us to live with greater compassion, love, and wisdom, and to use our power for the greater good of others. They explain that spiritual empowerment is about living authentically, with integrity and love, and using our unique gifts and strengths to contribute to the world in a meaningful way. The authors conclude by reminding readers that the path to transformation and empowerment is an ongoing journey. While shadow integration can be challenging and uncomfortable, it is also the key to unlocking our fullest potential. The process of transformation involves continual self-awareness, self-compassion, and a commitment to living authentically. As we embrace our shadow, we experience profound personal growth and emotional freedom, and we are empowered to live a life of purpose, creativity, and service to others. The authors encourage readers to embark on this journey with courage and openness, knowing that by integrating the shadow, they can create a life of greater peace, joy, and fulfillment. In conclusion, the shadow effect reveals that true transformation and empowerment arise from embracing and integrating the unconscious aspects of ourselves, the shadow. By confronting the hidden, often rejected parts of our psyche, we not only heal and reclaim our personal power, but also unlock our fullest potential. This process of shadow integration leads to emotional freedom, creativity, and deeper connection with others, allowing us to live authentically and with purpose. The journey to integration is ongoing, but it is through this process that we move toward becoming our truest, most empowered selves. At MindFuel Audio, we believe that personal growth, emotional healing, and empowerment are key to living a fulfilling life. Just as the integration of the shadow unlocks hidden strengths, our mission is to help you tap into your full potential through motivational and intellectual audiobooks. Whether you are on a journey of self-discovery, seeking personal transformation, or looking for tools to foster a more empowered mindset, MindFuel Audio offers content that encourages self-reflection, growth, and authenticity. Join us as we explore ideas and insights that fuel your mind, inspire your spirit, and empower you to live the life you are truly meant to lead.